Hey everyone.
Hello.
Howdy.
Hey Gretchen. Hey Jason.
Wait, are you changing the lighting?
Yeah, I was like, how are you doing that? Did you just have like a light on you that you're like
No.
adjusting
That,
or
that's camera controls.
camera
Where?
controls? Nice. I
Uh,
can
it's
see.
it's just part of a. It's just a Logitech webcam, and that's just it has some controller software.
Ah, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Like I
That's
look like a witness protection shadow in like half my calls.
I think you meant to say in half my calls I'm recognizable.
I
Very
like go on to like FaceTime or like Zoom beforehand and just try to make sure if I'm in a different environment, just to make sure I'm not looking scary or freaky.
good.
I have no control over my camera.
On Monday nights, every other Monday, I have a meeting that ends at 8:15, and then need to like quickly transition to the 8:30 analyst call. And so half the time I'm like in the car and it's like looking at my nose as my phone is in my lap or like, something like
Wonders
And
of technology.
that's the current Dell laptops have the webcam at the bottom. It is like to make like a thinner bezel at the top, I guess, but it is just engineered to give people up nose shots in conference calls.
that. Nice. Let's see. Well, I'm sure. Actually, Dan can't join us today, right? But I think
Yeah.
Rob is.
Yeah, I would expect Rob.
Is Ray like? Do you think he'll be able to, or
No,
like
I
what
don't
his
think he'll be.
availability in general is?
Yeah, I mean, he has like a full-time job now, so I don't think he'll be able to make like these weekly meetings.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I mean, he was able to like help us through the hiring, a lot of the hiring, gratefully, and then
Mhm.
I think the sysadmin he was gonna like ask you the two of you to like take over that or
Mhm.
like spearhead it. But I haven't talked to him in a while because he's been really busy like working on his new job.
Mhm.
But I know he did express interest, just like coming back, like in his spare time, trying to help where like he found like the most interest. You know, because
Mhm.
yeah. But yeah, I don't think we should expect him to go to like the meetings every week and stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
That reminds me that we need to talk about the sysadmin position. I feel like I have no idea like what that position like. Well, actually, okay, this is just my like lack of having read materials on it. Um, but yeah, I don't necessarily know like what that person would do or like where they'd plug in. So
Yeah.
Well, right now there's definitely a hole in terms of, again, I shouldn't say definitely this early on. It looks to me from the outside still that there's a hole on whenever there is an operational problem of somebody being able to see that and respond to it, on a rotation. So that's kind of definitely a thing that could be good. Because so far I think it's mostly been Rob or Dan kicking things over, like whenever the diffing server had problems with those hanging processes.
Yeah. 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 That was my understanding. I know like how it's written in the grant that the person would be like under web monitoring, and so like helping us with our servers, DevOps, and stuff like that. But I feel like um, there's the hope that they can help archive, like just help generally and like handle like the website, like the 100 days report, like any certification stuff. Like that's not web monitoring, but that sysadmin could take on that role. So like little things like that, just basically like just maintaining like our various different websites and stuff. That was my general understanding. Hey, Rob. We were just talking about the sysadmin role a little bit and kind of like what the expectation of that role was, because Gretchen and Jason were gonna, begin that process, and that was handed over to them from Ray. Do you have like a sense of what you feel like the sysadmin? I don't think you're involved in the hiring much at all.
So. I have stayed 100% away from all of this round of hiring, but the gist I felt like I got was to be the person who manages ops for all of, not just, primarily for all the applications and things we have, in web monitoring, in Edge as a whole, in archivers, but also like ops for external services we use.
Yeah.
So they should.
Ops for external services, what's an example of that?
They should be the go-to person for like, I need access to edit this thing. They're the person who like owns that across everything. Yeah. Like individuals might also be able to do that for you, but like if you don't know who to go to this person and they will be able to do that. And they should also know who to ask if it's not their decision.
Yeah. That I was saying the similar thing. Like it would be across all the Edge. Yeah. Was that helpful, Gretchen, Jason?
Yeah. And so, is the idea that just based on what Ray said, is that like Jason and I should figure out like a job description and hiring, follow the same processes was for us, but build a team and that kind of thing.
Yeah, the job description's already been approved. You guys should
right.
Look it over, and then make sure it still jives with like how we're feeling about that position, and then create a committee and then like go through the hiring processes that we've already done before. So, could try to ping Ray just have his opinion on that real quick, like, or any notes, any like handover notes that he'd have. I think he wouldn't mind that much. Just giving you guys extra information.
Okay. Yeah. First, I'll look through the hiring folder because I'd guess there's a lot in there that I haven't looked at yet.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
I think we can get started.
Well, so let's start with analyst updates.
All right. So based on our Monday meeting, I did compile a document linked here, kind of just like the basic goals and kind of, progress to date and outputs that we're hoping for in both the report writing team and the research team. And so hopefully that'll just give a better idea of kind of the directions that we want to go. It's, very basic document, and I can do more, more detailed examples if that would help. But that's a first crack at that. We did vote and discuss and decide at the analyst meeting on Monday night to move forward with the new classification scheme, which I'm very excited about. So the template for it is linked in this document, and that includes the it includes instructions for the different columns. So let me know what else is needed or desired for helping incorporate this into the annotations, because it has different columns, but hopefully the kind of where they'd add like the one or leave it blank as far as the is this a link change or a content change or blah blah blah. Hopefully that's self-explanatory, and then the figuring out what to do exactly with the topics and subtopics and how that would relate to tags. We can figure that out. I'm happy to give like a tutorial or kind of a walkthrough of it also, explain the goals in each one or each part. That would be helpful. But anyway, so for now we're moving forward with, they've got a new template for their analyst sheets and a new shared important changes doc, and we'll start incorporating into that. And then, hopefully there won't be much iteration necessary, but if there is, we can work on that. And then whenever it's ready for annotations in Scanner and figuring out what the kind of, I liked the idea of like a weekly CSV output of the important changes doc or something. That does seem like a reasonable solution for the short term. So anyway, however that, like, whatever makes most sense with rolling that out and on whatever timeline. But we've moved at least over to this classification system for now. And the only thing about the only thing about that was different from what we had kind of talked about when we like brought up the idea of tags is some hesitation about any like ad hocness of the tags of being able to be like, oh, there's this new tag, like this, I didn't find a way to describe this in the suggested tag, so here's this new one. And thinking of another process for deciding on new tags, just from as we mentioned, a couple of people's experience of like not wanting like many different kinds of tags to like basically describe the same thing, but not just like a really clear avenue of like a capitalized letter versus a not capitalized letter. But like my experience in public lab was when people want to talk about particulate matter, there was like PM, which is how EPA describes it. It's like PM or PM 2.5 or PM 10 or particulate matter or particle pollution or aerosol or airborne particle, and it was just like not something that I think would be like really easily identifiable, like in an automated way that these are the exact same thing, but that are. So yeah, just some further work to do to figure out what's going to work there, I think. And then lastly, one of the analysts, Annie Liu, is a CS major and is really interested in the dev side. And I was like, oh, well, we have a weekly standing meeting, and she can't come right now because she's working. She has work during this time, but she's going back to school soon, and said that she'd love to come and just be introduced to folks and see where she could plug in. So that in a couple weeks, I'll introduce her to you all.
That would be great.
Okay, let's just do dev updates in order.
Basically done is all the things that were on review for last week is done. Waiting for Dan's review on some questions about that environment.yaml file so we can fix the deploy instructions so that other people can use them and not get the wrong thing. Basically switching the deploy instructions back to not use environment.yaml. And which also reflects the way our current deployment actually works. And all the same sort of in progress stuff. I have a bunch of notes for further discussion things at the end, but that's it.
Kevin?
I've just been catching up this week, but I did start on the code of conduct, adding that to our repos. So I don't know if anybody wants to take a quick look. Dan already approved it. I tried to be as minimal as possible because I'm not sure like what type of language we want to take other than just pointing to. We have one. We have a code of conduct. Here it is. But Rob, I know you've been working on docs a lot.
Can you rope Dawn in for that?
Yeah.
I think she is the person who would have insight about a good way to word it.
I'll ask her for a review on that before I merge, and then and then I can just copy that across all the other repos once everybody's okay.
Perfect.
And then other than that, just catching up on stuff.
And then I've been working on my first pass of Rob's Ansible playbook. I got some good feedback from him. Dan's Ansible playbook. I'm so sorry, Rob and Dan. Dan's been gone, so I just looked to the first person next to my portrait. It's always Rob. I got good feedback from Dan on that, and there's a little bit more to do really surrounding DB with that, and that's sort of the related issue I opened up with Rob, actual Rob. That's just me sort of feeling my way around how we're using Rails so that we can get to grips on the pieces of it that we are going to be automating the deployment of. Rob's given me a pretty good boundary of where to stop the automated stuff, which I think is very reasonable, but I want to make sure that it's nice and solid up to that boundary. And then everything else on my up next is copied over from my last up next. So, I do think that probably I'm going to end up closing out as not actually a bug the issues that I opened up on DB, because I think that was just me getting tripped up over Rails behavior, as Rob said from the get-go. That's all I have. So let's
Wait, so is the blocking? I thought the blocking thing was that same thing though.
The blocking thing was that same thing. Yeah, I think basically that you're probably right, that what I'm getting tripped up is that second pass under test. I haven't rearranged my test.
Okay, so you're just saying the wording of the issue is wrong.
Yeah, yep,
Okay.
exactly.
But it's still a blocking issue. You just misunderstood.
Yeah, so I'm going to take it exactly. So I'm going to take a different approach, try to get around it. Without going too far into it, I think I can actually just run Rails.
There's an agenda item for if we have time to dive into this more next.
Okay, I'll skip down.
Big discussions, and we should figure out what we have time to actually talk about.
Okay. Then let's just go on to your other items then.
Is that it?
Yeah, that was it for me.
No Internet Archive updates. I guess I need to stop dragging my feet on it. So the quick things I had is I'm going to be gone next week, and Kevin is too.
Yeah.
I think we'll probably both be somewhere 30,000 feet in the air.
Yeah.
And I unified the two templates. And one thing I changed on this one is also on the unified template is I rephrased needs review to blocked, which is I think what we originally had. It's just that we so rarely, the amount of time various people were putting in was so off from each other that people rarely felt blocked on somebody else. And so like needing a review was the only blocking issue. But like I wanted to rename that back because what should be under there, like for you, Jason, is the thing with the DB configuration. Because if that means you can't get other stuff done, like that needs to be clear to everybody else. So whoever knows more about that can drop other things and fix that so that you can keep working. So that's the only big change I made there. And I guess we'll use that template next week. And then, yeah, I think we have like some big questions, which are this thing about like where we're listing meeting stuff. Question about what we're putting priority on right now. So that has to do, with you and the analyst, Gretchen. And then this DB configuration situation. And then Gretchen, questions about sysadmin hiring. Oh shit, AWS. Yes, we need to reapply. So far as I'm aware. Yeah, we should make sure to do that because I think we have to do it by like next week. Okay. I think that's easy. The answer is yes.
Is that something I can do?
I think so. I think you should get with Nick and figure it out, because Nick is the person who sort of ring-led and made sure all the relationship was right and everything last time. So he's probably the point person from AWS's perspective on it.
And he mentioned something, it was like a quick Slack note, so I didn't like have a chance to like ask him, but he said something about like having to explain if we didn't use all available space, like why, like how much we did use and why we didn't use as much, and if we still want as much, like that sort of thing. Is there a place I could just like look up those numbers?
I'm not sure they're very easy. Like AWS's stuff makes them very hard to look up.
Okay.
I would guess we have probably used about half of it. And I guess that's sort of expected, because we planned out to have space for web monitoring and space for a data together node, and data together just never did it. I don't know how best to phrase that for Amazon, that half of our organization just decided not to do it, just not to take advantage of it, of the free credits. But that's why we're way under, is because half the organization just decided not to take the free credit. Yeah, so that's what I would say about that. If you need detailed numbers, let me know and I'll pull them together.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, but the way the AWS console stuff splits everything up all over the place, like you can look at the bill, but to actually like figure out what is where, you have to dig around a lot.
Okay. Okay, cool. Well, I'll get with Nick, and then be sure to ask for anything I need before you travel, which is a week from today, or
Friday night. So I'm going to the data together thing. So I'm flying out Friday night.
Okay.
I'll be in the air coming back on Wednesday.
Got it. Okay. Cool. I'll work on it fast.
Okay. I mean, I should have time in and around whatever's going on there too. So in theory, it's very highly related stuff anyway. So, okay. So back off, we got like 8 minutes. What's most important to talk about? The meeting stuff, the prioritization, or configuration?
I think the priority would be very important.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because
so
I feel.
I think so.
Okay. I feel like I guess this is really, what would you like me to work on, since I feel like whichever of these it is, it's on me. So like we have 3 big conceptual things going on, which is like improving the diffs so that they're better, which is a continuous and ongoing project. Getting the annotations turned back on, so that you can make annotations on that diff view, and they go into the database, and then you can query them and search them and things later. But that means you put them in there instead of into Google Docs, into Google Sheets. And then the Internet Archive importing. I think probably that last one is most important, because I think money runs out soon or whatever. I've probably been dragging my feet a little bit on it, because I feel not great about what we ultimately have to do. But I think I sort of got in that meeting with Mark, he basically said, no, it's fine, hit us hard. So I should stop dragging my feet on it. And then, yeah, should I stop worrying about diff stuff and focus on annotation things? Or is it really, annotation's not that critical? It's more about you getting your house in order on how you're structuring it now, which you've done. So it's not that big a deal whether they're in the database or not, or whatever, in the short term.
I think that I agree that Internet Archive is the biggest priority. And then as far as the diffs versus annotations, I think I think both are functional now, you know? So there's like, I don't think that either one is like necessarily more pressing than the other. So maybe we could like revisit when that becomes like, you know, when one of those is about to become the top priority or something. If that makes sense.
Well, so like, let me put it this way. So I got to focus on getting IImport working, but as soon as it's working, and that's the end of that story. The other question, we have sort of up till now explicitly put aside the annotation stuff, right? So we had it in and working, and then we turned it off. And so until the time at which you're like, okay, we really want to start experimenting with that, I'm just going to leave it that way. Because then I'm not worrying about 20 gajillion different things. But if you sort of feel like, actually, it seems like it would be a huge boon for us to actually have that, then like I should focus more on that than worrying about all the 5 billion things that would be nice to do in the diffs, right? Like, oh, how can we, you know, set up the prioritization pipeline using the diff stuff? How can we like better identify when something's moved, you know, because it always looks like a confusingly large change, or like nothing changed and it says everything changed, but it's actually moved, you know. How can we like how can we fix this issue we have with like spacers and the general algorithm, because we did a bunch of forking from LXML and I have to rewrite the entire tokenization system for the HTML diff. Like there's endless sets of things to be improved about the diffs. Oh, and the whole thing about like making sure that assets show up right. So all the like images and everything else and the styles on old pages or on new pages that have security problems. So that all those are like big things in the diffing area that I will work on if we're not worrying about annotations, I guess is what I'm saying. So should I, so the question is like, so it sounds like IA is the most important thing. So we'll do that. Once that's done, like, should I put all the other diff stuff aside and focus on turning annotations back on and doing all the things about making sure that's good and sitting down with analysts and being like, okay, here's how you use this. And because that's the first thing you're really doing a lot more in the application. That means a lot more time explicitly gathering feedback from all of you and making sure that the way it works is good, or taking your suggestions for what should be better, so it's not in the way or taking up too much space, or like you need these keyboard shortcuts for it, or you know, any of the gajillion things that would make running through and doing the annotations in the app view better.
I think that might be, the next priority, because I think that like the diffs are like definitely functional, even like there are, you know, a couple of funky things, like, you know, I don't think anything is like a block on that. And the potential boon to like the research group and the report writing group for even just things like being able to do a database search is so huge that I think, not that we can't do it without it, but just like it's I think that the potential of like impact of that is really great.
Okay. Kevin?
I was just wanted to say, like, on the annotation side, I could probably help a little bit more than on the diff side. So if you needed like an extra hand, because I'm more familiar with the UI. And I think the next milestone was kind of, we were moving in that direction, the annotations too, which is nice to revisit right now. But yeah, I would go for annotations after import as well.
Okay.
Or that would be my vote.
All right, cool. We're at the 30-minute mark. Do people want to stick around to talk about the other stuff, or do you need to run?
I can stick around, and I'm to be more aware of what's happening between people. I am always on board for that. I think it helps.
Okay.
So I can stick around as long as we need.
Should we talk a little bit about this meetings thing, since I think it sort of affects everybody everywhere?
Yeah, I can go into that since I've been thinking about it a lot. So basically, so we have in the protocol, I was rereading the Edgy protocol last night, and so we have a space for like a meetings index, and before it was that weird hack folder thing. So I believe as an org, we want a meeting index. The problem is within the protocol, we say that this meeting index is public, which is public within Edgy, like anybody in Edgy can see it. But it doesn't take into account that we have channels that are public to the outside world on Archivers to like the actual public. So the original idea was that this would only be shared within Edgy, but we're bumping up against that we want to use it on these more public channels. So there's two situations I thought about is either we just don't publicize this board, so don't put it on like announcements and stuff like that. Or the other thing would be to like have two separate boards, one for like actual public meetings like Data Together, web monitoring, Archivers, and internal ones for like, you know, our Edgy-wide meetings, EDJ meetings, all the other stuff that we don't want to publicize too much. They're both kind of wonky, and we're going to have to bring this up to steering committee because it's in the protocol, so we can't just make a decision and go with it because it does affect everybody. But I would just like to know what their thoughts on it. Because the other thing is just to leave the board as is and not publicize it and just like just share it among ourselves. But I don't think that's been effective because people just forget about it and nobody maintains it, and nobody thinks about it and nobody sees it. So that's the maintenance problem, because like if people never see it and use it, then like it's just festers. So that's the problem. Is there anything unclear there? Okay. Do you guys have an opinion on what we should propose or how we feel we should go? Go ahead, Jay.
So, I mean, this is fresh for me, the way Edgy does meetings. I mean, you hit the nail on the head about it being having a maintenance problem because there's a level of effort in several different platforms to make a meeting happen in the way that you're supposed to do it. I mean, to me, it all seems like sort of a complicated workaround for things that are a good fit for going in a public calendar or an organization-wide calendar. And I haven't seen what it is that we're getting from this that we couldn't get from iCal. So yeah, I would be interested to hear what the history is on that.
So I think the thing you're thinking about is that we have to set up notes in Google Docs, we have to set up the listing in Trello, and we have to set up a reminder in Slack. I don't think there's any getting around. You got to set up notes to live somewhere. So that's a real thing. And I don't think there's any getting around reminders in Slack either. Because that's like, even if not everybody has a calendar, there is a calendar, and we're on it. So clearly not everybody, pays attention to it, and having the reminders important. I think the way I see what's in Trello as valuable is not about anything upcoming or notification or knowing when things are going to be. It's about history. It's about being able to say, okay, these were when all the meetings were, here are all the notes. I need to go back to that meeting from 2 weeks ago because we said something about X and I want to check into it. And it's it's kind of a pain to like do that on a calendar. I think I don't remember exactly how we wound up with Trello. I think maybe it was that PackCon had been putting a whole bunch of stuff on Trello at the time, and we were also dealing with the pain of like hack folder breaking more than it had been. So I feel like it's important that we solve all of those needs, and a calendar doesn't necessarily solve those needs, and we do have a calendar and whatnot. I think one way to solve the problem you're talking about, Kevin, about the like public and edgy versus public is just to have two true Trello boards, and have a column for us in the edgy Trello board, but it just has one entry and it says link to this other Trello board. Or even cooler, Trello has a way to like import, like share columns between boards, but I bet it does not. It'd be cool if there was. And the other thing I'll say about it is probably the same thing I said long ago when we switched over to Trello, which is it works. My like worry feeling on it is that it is yet another place. And part of me wonders if we just had like a running Google Doc that just listed links to the notes for each doc, whether that would be better. And then those sort of index docs could live in a edgy meetings folder. And because they're Google Docs, we can take the one or two that are public meetings and just mark them as anybody with the link. The downside of that is that for people who are looking for that information, if you're within Edgy, it's easy to find, and if you're not within Edgy, it's not. Versus like if there is a public Trello board with all the stuff about public stuff happening in Edgy, like that, you still have to find out where that Trello board is, but then it has all the things instead of just the one thing, and needing to know the link for each of the one things that's public. So I don't know, but part of me feels like that might be easier because then it's in one place, right? Like there's the Google Drive and it's in Google Docs, which is where you set up all the things related to listing meetings and notes and blah blah blah. Anyway, that's my 2 cents on it. I think I don't want to go too much back and forth on the whole thing because we did that before, and it felt to me like we were just spending so much time on just get things listed somewhere so people can see them. Yeah. So I think both solutions will work. If somebody has a better solution for handling stuff that's everyone in Edgy and stuff that's like everyone.
Yeah, I feel like we shouldn't I also feel like we shouldn't spend too much time on it. And then the 2 proposals that you had, I can just take it to the steering committee and kind of, because between us, are we kind of happy with either? Just as long as like other people are okay with it, or is there like something people are really for or really against here? No. Okay. Yeah, so I'll just bring this up to the steering committee because like it's in the protocol and it's something obviously that I had questions about whether it's valuable or something that's wanted, but it's in the protocol, then obviously like we want this, like a listing of meetings within Edgy. So you just got to figure out the way to make it work and people can use it.
The other thing, I'll keep suggesting things even though I want to close this down. The other thing we could do is, so the practice that IPFS has that works okay is they've got a Google Doc where you do notes and everything for the current meeting, but then they move those notes to like a notes folder in GitHub. And so there's a GitHub repo that's just has all the meeting notes from all the meetings that you would care about. And there's, we could put that in the all Edgy repo, or we could put it in the Edgy/web monitoring repo. Just here's all the notes from all the meetings. That way it's super public and easy to find, but it's also very different from where things that are Edgy meetings are going to go. And it's also like maybe foreign for half of the people in Edgy who don't spend a lot of
Yeah.
time on GitHub.
Yeah. I was gonna say that would be my my concern right there is just like the edgy more like the research team and the IGE meetings and the EDJ group they might find difficulty in doing that, and it would be spread among, I don't know, it would all this be contained in just like the overall edgy repo, like the notes for every group would go into the singular repo.
That would probably be easiest if they should all be equally visible.
Yeah.
It just comes back to that. Yeah. We have the like edgy public and public. And,
Okay.
anyway, yeah, sorry. I had this idea, and at first it sounded good, and as I talked through it, I was like, oh, it does not fit our context. It fits other contexts.
Okay.
I think probably my initial negative reaction to the Trello board was due to the fact that I didn't have access to it, but it was anticipated that that's a place I'd be looking for things. So whenever I think about the core of what my frustration was there, that is maybe more of an onboarding issue than actually a platform or workflow problem for like moving forward.
Yeah.
I
was just going to note, I think I added it to the onboarding doc that like that's important. People should have access to Trello.
I think doing it in, I can see why it's this over Drive, because it's so easy for any organization for their Google Drive to become kind of a rat's nest of stuff that's hard to navigate through. So, I mean, there is definitely power in the fact that I can look and see at a glance what's happened in all the different groups ordered by date, for sure.
Cool. Gretchen, did you have anything to say before we close this out? And then
Well, I feel like I've been in many groups that like that try all the, try Trello, try Asana, try whatever other project management software, and just because we don't actually rely on it, it becomes out of date, and then like a lot of work to keep up to date, because if you rely on it, you're in it anyway. So that's my only because we're dependent upon Google Docs as it is, everybody's gonna be in there. But as you said, it doesn't have the utility that these other things do. But I've just been part of a lot of groups that our Asana board goes out of date 30 seconds after a meeting. You know what I mean?
Well, I was gonna say, because then like I said, I was reading the protocol and it listed the original hack folder thing, and nobody was maintaining it. So maybe this is something we just kind of drop. I don't know. Like, if nobody wants to maintain it and nobody wants to be in it, maybe it's just we do without it. I don't know. That doesn't sound good to me either. But
are you saying do without the meeting index?
And an index at all, because nobody was keeping any form of it maintained.
I mean, that's a good other question, right? I think our set of meetings is the only one that's at all maintained in the meeting index right now.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I will have to ask. I will ask that question for SE tomorrow. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Sorry, this took longer, but I don't want to.
No worries.
Beat this to death.
No worries.
We're done. Jay, did you want to do this DB questions for Rob?
Oh, I think actually that my overall questions have been answered by Rob by your feedback that you gave me. The main thing, basically, my next step really is just to peel apart some of that Rails activity. I think maybe by feeding it like a trace or a verbose flag and seeing if I can actually parse whether the thing in dev succeeded and it was just test that failed, because the default output isn't really clear in Ansible. So I think if it's just that underlying issue of, oh hey, test is also running whether I asked for it or not, I know where to go to work around that. It seems very unlikely that I have something special going on in my environment that you don't have in yours, based on all the work you did to verify that it was happy in your environment. But I've got a really simple test plan to sort that out, which is I'm just going to authorize the dev role in Postgres to also be able to write to the test database And if that clears it up, then obviously that's the issue. So pending that, and that's my expected outcome, then I'll just basically try to explode out those failures that are happening from the test database failure, and then see if I can parse that. So I actually don't think that'll be a super big deal.
Okay. So because there have been so many approaches to this, and it clearly is a problem in a variety of ways, I was going to post my own little take on it. So I'll try and do that right after this, so you can take a look at that and see if it's clarifying or helpful or whatever. Why is it a blocker for Ansible work?
So I'm trying to get so I don't want to run migrations on a deployment, but I do want to at least get to the point where I'm doing an idempotent run to see that we can connect to the database and that it has a schema. And that's as far as I want to go. But like in the current state, it just is always going to fail if I'm not in production because of that test run failure. Or, I mean, the other option would be to give the dev user the permission to do stuff in the test database, but then you're going to run through extra cycles completing those things that you don't necessarily want to run. So I'm just going to kind of pick apart some of those DB rake commands, the output from them, to see if I can get just the action I want. Because the ideal with Ansible is that you can just run that deployment any number of times and it's not going to break anything. Like, you want to be confident that you're not going to blow out your state, basically, when you run your provisioner.
Right. I guess what I'm wondering is, because I feel like a thing that we talked about was like one of the things that wound up being a problem for the whole Ansible setup was that, like, instead of just trying to solve the simple problem of like how do we use Ansible to deploy to the server, like we like went off into the woods trying to like make Ansible do everything. Why do you need Ansible to do a deployment into an environment that's not production? Specifically into an environment that is development.
Right. I see what you're saying. So I haven't looked through the code to see if there's any other interesting behavior, but it's true, I could just set the rack environment to production for my development work. If there's no other changes that happen other than those the things that are set in database YAML, if that's it, then sure, like that would be the quick and dirty thing.
There's lots of stuff. I think there are very few things. There's a reasonable amount of things that change depending on whether you're in dev or test or production, which is why I would think if you're testing anything with Ansible, you should be testing it with the production environment.
Well, that's where I should probably get more granular with how I'm thinking of environments, because right now I'm just thinking of the whole thing as either production, dev, or test. From basically this is really my Ansible dev versus this is the application dev. So I should, if I just break that up a little bit more in the way I'm setting my configuration, then yeah, that problem would go away.
Okay.
And while again it may look like I'm a little bit off in the weeds, I'm trying to really understand the behavior of this application, because I don't want to hand the keys over for something if I don't really understand what's going on under the hood. And this right away was sort of this doesn't work at all how I would expect. So part of that is me spending a little bit more time up front to get comfortable with how this works.
Yeah, I mean, so the thing I would say, hopefully that's helpful, is the reason that I think with your Ansible work that it's important to set things in production is not because it's a production environment or not, but because when your environment is development specifically, Rails does a lot of things different, like not just config, like it does a lot of things different to like make development just work. Versus it treats any environment that's not either. So it also does some special things for tests so that you get nice output. But any environment besides those two, it treats everything explicitly. It's like, okay, like it is whatever you say. So I think when you're trying to create scripts to like set up an environment explicitly a certain way, it's important to like not use the dev or test environment, because Rails does magical shit with dev and test. And especially with dev, like dev is like super magical. Like dev is so magical that it does everything once and it does it again with different configuration. And like maybe it's loaded the configuration right that second time, maybe not. Like if you have parts that come from outside what's explicitly managed by Rails. So that's why I think you might want to approach it that way.
I will take that advice. That will be my very next step.
Okay.
I will just set down all of the sledgehammering I've done on Rails config, which again, I think I realized even probably about 15 minutes after I did the pull request and I was looking at it, I was just like, ugh, this is very imperative and it's in a YAML file. So yeah, thank you for that.
Okay. The other maybe helpful context setting, if you haven't done a lot of Rails stuff, is that like the big parts of configuration to pay attention to are everything's in the config folder. And what we do, which is I think what most modern applications do, is drive all the stuff in there off of environment variables. Because environment variables are much easier to manage in like any setup that you have. But like when Rails came out, like that was not a normal thing. And so it was instead like, here you have this config folder, which you might entirely swap out between different environments. And so there's like three things that matter in there. One is there's environments that just list like there's a production.rb, production.rb is test.rb, and development.rb, which is just like a giant imperative file that just like sets things up and does things and like does everything in the universe. And then there is initializers. And the idea with initializers is that really you should be doing less stuff in those old style imperative folders and start saying you have an initializer for each sort of like gem or module or piece of your application that configures that part. But that's also all imperative for doing like startup time configuration. And then there's database.yaml, which is like ultra magical, which is that, because everything is based around your database, they're like, we'll treat database as super special. And instead of putting the database configuration things where all the other configuration per environment goes, we just have its own magical file that has its own listing for each environment. And so like you have to pay attention to what's going on in all three of those areas. And one of them is mostly declarative, which is the YAML file, except it's a template, so you can't put imperative stuff in there. And then the other ones are all really imperative, which means who knows what could be going on. And you do have to like have a reasonably sharp understanding of what's happening. Most of what is in the environment files is the default, with a few modifications around like mail setup. The initializers I've tried to avoid in 90% of cases, doing anything that asks Rails what environment it's in, and just looks at whatever environment variables you have configured and makes smart decisions based on whether you have things set or not set at all, or have them set to a particular value. So hopefully most of those shouldn't have any confusing magic. I think there might be like one exception to do with like secret keys somewhere, that in dev, like it's just like, fine, we'll make up a thing for you. Versus in production, it screams at you. It's like, nope. I think that's the only place where I sort of make changes, is that in production, or I think generally in non-development, it'll scream the world is ending because you did not set this thing right, versus in other environments it just goes like, I'll figure it out for you.
Well, that's another reason for me to be, and it was my plan to get to production as my Rails environment. But it sounds like, yeah, again, I just should have started there, because that's more valuable for me to run into those kind of problems sooner. And also, so Yes. Yeah. My Rails experience, my Ruby experience is relatively recent, but my Rails experience, I last touched a Rails app in 2008.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it's moved along. It does more stuff now, different stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that was super valuable. I thank you, Rob.
Yeah. No problem. I think that covers all the things that we need to cover. Anything else? Cool.
That's good.
All right. See you all online.
See you soon. Bye.